Most people think that Medicare is going to pay for all that. Medicare is essentially health insurance on steroids and hospitalization on steroids. But in most states, after 90 days, Medicare is not going to pay for an assisted living facility or a long-term care facility. You do. And this sounds really hard, but most long-term care facilities want a full financial statement of you.
Welcoming you to I'm Just Saying, Let's Get to the Point, my podcast. I'm Robbyn Battles. It's very nice to meet you. And my guest is John Becker, MBA, CMFC. You're a financial professional from Clearview Wealth Management, and you help individuals and families build long-term strategies around retirement, investment planning, financial confidence. And with an MBA and the Chartered Mutual Fund Counselor designation. Have to tell me what that all means later, but welcome to my podcast, John.
Hi, thanks for having me on, Robbyn. Yeah, Clearview Wealth Management. We're based in Melbourne, Florida, but we have offices and fellow advisors and assistants all across the I-4 corridor. And we actually cover 23 states in the country. So not just Florida.
Is California one of your states?
It sure is.
Welcome. Welcome to California.
Yeah. I call it 23 different nations under one, really, because of all the different rules with probate law and everything else. But that's another podcast, probably for another day.
That's definitely for another day. So let's start really simple. And when I hear financial planner, personally, I think, oh my gosh, I probably don't have enough money. I probably don't have enough assets. Is that the wrong way to think about a financial planner?
Yeah, I would actually liken that to people who think that somehow you have to be rich to have an estate plan, for instance. Like they're almost afraid to go to an estate planning attorney because I don't have a lot of money. I just have a house and a few $100,000 laying around it. That's all I have. Virtually everyone probably needs some degree of estate planning, whether it be a will or a trust. I think that's also true for financial planning because most everybody at least needs to have a little bit of guidance, whether they're do-it-yourselfers, which a lot of people are, or there's someone who really
Right.
guidance on how to navigate the markets, how to properly save for retirement, and not just how they're invested, but where they're invested in terms of 401ks and Roth IRAs. And heck, insurance is also difficult waters to be navigating for a lot of folks too. Everything from life insurance and disability and long-term care, home and auto. So yeah, we navigate all those waters for our clients.
So let's fast forward in age and then we'll come back to first time investors. So if I'm 10 years out from retiring, what should I already have in place? And if I don't, am I too late?
Wow, you haven't read it hasn't been published yet, but we actually co-authoring a book called Countdown to Retirement with one of my fellow associates on the team, Terry George, who has even more experience than I do in the field as a financial planner and CFP. But it's actually explicitly geared towards folks that are 5 years or less from retirement. But then we also have a simple checklist for folks that are maybe 10 years out, getting a little bit more of a, how to put it, macro focus and micro focus, but simplified for the average Joe or Jane, where it's going, hey, have you really done your basic estate plan, especially if you have children? Do you have your proper beneficiaries designated? Have you really started saving for retirement? Have you been saving enough for retirement? And then if any gaps or knowledge are there, or you're not necessarily 100% sure, hey, it's okay. They'll reach out to a financial planner who maybe they're not even going to end up in handling your investments, but maybe you just want someone to lay out a blueprint for you to make sure you're on track and to see if there's any pitfalls that you're not accounting for.
So if one doesn't own property, what kind of financial planning could they do? And I ask this because there's still a lot of people that are seniors headed in that direction and they don't own property and they don't have a lot. Is there anything that they could do? Because I feel you hear the stories about Social Security, you hear stories about pensions. You hear all of this noise. What can someone that's in that position do?
Yeah, I would still say that would be an ideal person to at least sit with maybe a fee-based financial planner. And
A
actually,
what? A fee-based one?
yes, a fee-based financial planner, because quite frankly, you're not bringing them investments or anything to manage on your behalf, but
Right.
maybe have an objective third party who specializes in these areas go through what's your cash flow analysis going to be like? What are your pension options really looking if you happen to have one? What are some proper social security strategies that you should be accounting for? Because I know everyone starts going on, you should take it at age 62 and invest the difference. Or no, you should wait until 70 because that's maxed out. There's a lot of other things you got to take in consideration, especially if you're married.
So if you're let's say if you're married and you're just starting Social Security, and maybe you're in that position of where you really don't need, it's not, oh my gosh, thank goodness, now I'm going to be able to pay bills this month. What would be some good starter advice for someone that just started getting Social Security?
The loaded follow-up question to that is, are they before full retirement age or are they after full retirement age?
Let's say they're just qualified to start taking their Social Security. And what age is that in California? 65?
62 is the earliest age of eligibility.
Okay.
65 is actually Medicare eligibility for most people in the nation. Age 67 is currently the full retirement age for most near retirees, but some folks were actually 66. Some were 66 in 2 months, 66 in 4 months, 66 in 8
Oh,
months. It really depends on the year in which you were born, not facetious, but most people that you're talking about that are within 5 to 10 years of retirement, they're probably going to
right.
be age 67 for a full retirement age. But age 70 is
Okay.
maxes out.
So what does one do? They start getting this retirement money and they've got some savings. They haven't met with a planner. If I came to you and said, "Hey, I just started getting my Social Security. I do have savings. I do a little odds and end job still and whatnot, but what would you tell me to do with that Social Security money?"
Are you married or unmarried is the question to that person, first and foremost.
Well, today I'm married. No, just kidding. Yes, I'm married, and that's a whole other conversation. I'm kidding.
This isn't a dating podcast.
No, no, we're not giving all kinds of advice, just some financial advice today.
It's all about break-even analysis. So, what I mean
Okay.
is this: most spouses, presuming most people that are near retirement are going to be married for the most part, or they're
Okay.
also unmarried but divorced. And there's some really weird territory to get into if you happen to have been married for 10 years or more to a former spouse and you're now not currently remarried. That's an episode in its own right. I'm dead serious.
Okay. A
45
good tidbit to know that it might change things.
It absolutely would, but keep it simple. It's more like no husband and wife or husband, wife in our gay and lesbian communities. No one was born on exactly the same day with exactly the same health history, with the exact same genetics. So it's a
Right.
matter of just kind of let's just do the simple math and go, okay, did you also have different earnings histories? One may have been the breadwinner, one may have made substantially less, but almost no one's going to end up with the exact same Social Security benefit, even if they're born on the same day.
Okay.
Regardless. So let's just say the husband may be at 2,500, but the wife may be at 3,000. Well, that
Okay.
change a lot of dynamics as to who of the two should pull first, because the other kicker is if you are married, when one spouse passes away, the lower of the two benefits actually falls off. So
Oh, okay.
that's
All
another
right.
reason why you really have to get into the planning features and go, okay, what's the real break even analysis of when do we optimize things for both of you? But how do we optimize things when one of you is no longer with us? Because I've seen plenty of folks that just go, oh, we'll just go ahead and pull both of us. And I go, if you don't need one of your benefits right away, you do know that 15, 20 years from now, that lower of the two benefits falls off. I would say 2/3 of all people I've never met with before when we have a Social Security conversation did not know about that. They also don't know about
Okay.
widow tax, as we not so lovingly call it too.
What do you call the tax?
Widow tax or widow.
Widow tax. Okay, what is widow tax?
This is a dirty thing, but let's just say you're married filing jointly. You've been married for
Okay.
50, 60 years in some cases, and your spouse passes away. The very next tax filing year, you're treated as a single person again. So if you have a husband and wife and they're bringing in, say, 100 grand a year, good for you guys. You're doing okay in life. You're the middle class. But let's just say the next year, the wife had passed away and the husband's left behind, or vice versa. It doesn't matter. Yes, their social security went down a little bit. But let's just say their income's now 80 grand a year. Now they're going to be treated as 80 grand at a single person's rate, which actually is a higher tax rate than a married filing jointly couple. It's a dirty thing that I don't think a lot of people factor into all these conversations. Because even that person that doesn't have a whole lot in retirement savings, but may have a pension, may have social security and other things coming in, taxes are a big factor, kids. It just is. And last year we just had the big, beautiful Bill Act come into fruition, and that changes dynamics even further.
So is that helping seniors or is that hurting seniors?
Not to be vague, but this is a 2-word answer that applies to so many things. It depends.
It depends. Okay.
I'd say for the most part, this is broad brush speaking. There's now
Okay.
there's now a higher standardized deduction for retirees that are currently receiving Social Security. So in a lot of folks that are middle class, it's actually a pretty decent tax savings, as some people may be experiencing here short order because last year will be the first filing year in which they've experienced that. But if you're, let's just say, above 250, 300,000 in retirement income, little to no benefit added. And if you're very low income tax, as in no income tax whatsoever, you might not see any difference whatsoever. But for most middle class folks, that's benefit.
Did they call that? Is that I think they dubbed it the senior bonus.
Yeah, the actual official term is Medicare senior exemption limits, something to that effect.
Okay. They always have to give it these long, difficult names. Can we just keep it simple? Okay, let's move off of Social Security for just a second. And let's talk about people that put properties in trust. And now let's talk about people that own a couple of properties and they have them in a trust and they've got all this equity. What's something they should be doing? Because the generation right now that's turning 60, 70, 80, most of them have homes. They've got a lot of equity in their homes. What's some good advice for them?
I always ask a loaded question when
I ask lots of loaded questions.
but I like loaded question, which sometimes it tugs at the heartstrings for some folks. And I just tell
Right.
think when we're trying to figure out your goals and your objectives in your retirement, the home that you're in right now, is it your forever home? And some
Well,
people,
they think that it is, and then sometimes it's not. And I think that's what happens to a lot of people.
right. And for some folks, they also don't factor the biggest 800-pound gorilla that's hard to quantify for some folks. If you had a long-term care event, what happens to the house then?
So stop right there for just a second because I had something about long term care, and I think it's a great way to look at it because long term care, briefly tell our listeners what it is, why you should have it, and when you own property, how can you use some of that equity to pay for it? Like, how does that interfere with owning properties? How do you tie it together?
It varies state by state, but for the most part, when it comes to properties, there's going to be some broad brush that applies to most people listening to this podcast. But
Okay.
when it comes to long-term care insurance, there's a little bit of a misnomer that if you experience 2 of the 6 basic daily activities that we all take for granted, literally not being facetious here, but like toileting, bathing yourself, driving, eating, those types of things that we literally take and do day by day if we're surviving, right? Not even thriving,
Right.
surviving. If you can't do at least 2 of those 6, you are experiencing what's known as a long-term care episode, and you are deemed usually chronically ill. not temporarily, but chronically. Like, this isn't going to change. This is only going to get progressively worse. For instance, if I break my ankle, yeah, I'm probably not driving very well for the next few days. So that's one of those daily activities, but I'm expected to recover. But circumstance that you're not expected to recover is you're in your 80s, you break your hip, you have dementia, you have Alzheimer's, you have any of those things. Most physicians are going to say, yeah, you are not going to reverse this. That's true long-term care episode. Now, the issue being is, how do you care for it? The misnomer I was referring to earlier is most people think that Medicare is going to pay for all that. Medicare is essentially health insurance on steroids and hospitalization on steroids. But in most states, after 90 days, Medicare is not going to pay for an assisted living facility or a long-term care facility. You do. And this sounds really hard, but most long-term care facilities want a full financial statement of you. They want to see IRA statements. They want to see brokerage statements. They want to see pension statements. They want to make sure you can afford the facility and to do so for a long time, because they'd rather you be able to pay for it than having to go to Medicaid, because Medicaid does not pay the big buck in most states.
So I want to ask you a what if question, or could this possibly ever happen? The last statistics that I read about people, our population and where it's headed, I think it was 40% of America will be in their 60s, 70s, rolling into being seniors, where the population of people having babies and the 20s, 30s, that population is really declining over the next, I believe it was 10, 20 years. So with everybody aging and that population growing, is there ever going to be a time where they look at the healthcare system and go, you know what, we really need to have some sort of government long-term care?
I am not a bureaucrat, nor do I pretend to be one. The only thing I've ever seen proactive on the government's part is the following. If you purchase long-term care insurance, you do actually get a pretty sizable tax deduction for it. And the older
Right.
you are, the bigger the deduction. So that is some good news. But as far as, for lack of a better term, let me call it Obamacare for long-term care insurance,
Right.
I have not seen anything of the sort. I am an active participant in NAFA, which is National Association of Insurance and Financial Advisors. And for lack of a better term, it's a lobbyist outfit that kind of pushes for these types of topics. Nothing has been put on the docket. I honestly have never seen anything on a docket from the left wing or the right wing. So is it an
Do
interesting?
you
Yes, but I've never seen anything besides deductions for insurance premiums.
do you feel like they're even hearing that population is growing, that we really need to move some focus to that population? Or is it just healthcare in itself is just such a mega system that they're just too overwhelmed by the healthcare system as it is?
I think it's that third rail of politics.
Not trying to be political, but that's where when you talk about all of these Medicare, Medicaid, and all of those factors, that's government. And let me go back then to long-term care. When should somebody actually start looking at getting long-term care insurance?
There's many schools of thought. Some people say, oh, do it when you're about to retire. There are some that kind of go with the thinking of the earlier the better. And I would say the following. There's what I call long-term care domino effect. And what I mean by that is this. If you have a husband and wife that never did any real planning for it, and even if they didn't get insurance, but at least maybe they did, they earmarked some of their assets towards the what if one of them needs long-term care insurance, but they didn't want to buy the insurance itself, but they at least plan for it. Most people don't. Most people do not have anything earmarked to prevent or to fund a long-term care event. And truth be told, it's usually the middle class that gets squeezed the hardest by it, because the ultra wealthy, they got enough in savings that they can get through a 10-year episode in a mental care facility, which is usually, by the way, about $88,000 a year in California. Most middle class people, they're probably bankrupt within a few years. And yet those are the folks that probably need to do the most because most lower income, they're probably going to wind up on Medicaid very shortly into their long-term care episode, which is usually lower quality facilities in most states, but they're not the ones shelling out the money for it.
So if you're middle class and you're in California, I keep saying California just because I'm in California, so it makes more sense for me to ask that question. Everything is already so expensive. What if you have a family and typically middle class and you're thinking about long-term care, if you've got kids, they're probably in college, getting out of college, somewhere in that factor. So they're just done helping their kids get started, which most parents are. How do they turn around and now look at the cost of long-term care? Because it does, after a while, it escalates in cost. Am I correct or incorrect on that?
You are absolutely correct. For the most part, one of the greatest factors of inflation in our country for most Americans is actually the cost of healthcare. But what usually isn't included in that cost of healthcare is long-term care. And generally speaking, in most states, to assume the price of care goes up between 5 to 10% every year, that's actually a pretty good rule of thumb because they're the baby boomer generation. They're all retiring, but also getting into their 70s and 80s. And that's when the risk of a long-term care event really starts creeping in. Unfortunately, I think a lot of people also make more of an emotional decision when it comes to long-term care. And their kids sometimes are I don't want to say the victims of it, but just hear this out for a second. How many people say that, oh, it's okay, our daughter promised to take care of us? That's part of that domino effect I was talking about because, so let me get this straight. You're in your 80s and you have an episode, your daughter's going to take care of you. Yes. So if she's in her 50s, your grandchildren, her children are finally out on their own into the universe. She's in her prime earning years and she's just going to stop what she's doing to take care of you guys when she should be saving for her own retirement and how to insure for a long-term care episode. And now that domino effect is going to start coming into fruition because dad dies, mom moves into the house, takes care of mom 24/7. Mom dies, leaves almost no inheritance behind. And now the daughter or son, the next generation is now taking care of that child or that. You know what I mean? That's how that domino effect starts really kicking in. And I think
Well,
that's
and you see that happen all the time. There's more and more in our communities. You see the parents moving in with the kids because it's that multi-generational effect where it's just cheaper if they all combine and everyone doesn't have a power bill. Everyone doesn't have all those miscellaneous bills because they see mom and dad are getting older. But the reality of that is, just to look at a client I've got right now, the mom is really having dementia. She has a mortgage on her house and the daughter's taking care of her, but the daughter is getting ready to retire and there is no long-term care. And they're in this cycle and it's so sad to see. And you look at that cost, but you had said earlier, you can write the cost of that long-term care off. It's a pretty decent tax deduction.
like an actual business write-off, but it does end up acting as like an above the line tax line item. So husband and wife, the premiums are substantial. Let's just say it's $5,000 a year, which sounds like a lot of money. But at the same time, if you were say 70 years old and you're paying 5 grand a year, here's why I say it's not necessarily that terrible if you think about it, because if you only have 20 to 30 years ahead of you, sure, you may not use the insurance, but there's a very strong chance one of you will. And not to sound sexist, but it's usually the woman. Because if
Really interesting.
you go to any long-term care facility or memory care facility or assisted living, this is anecdotal, but it's also shown in statistics. Look around. The ratio of men to women, men 1 to 4, generally speaking. Because what usually happens is, okay, the husband has a stroke or has a major event. It usually takes the man out very quickly. It's usually not a very long episode. So even if they have long-term care insurance, they might not even have time to kick in because they have 180 days or 90 days exclusionary period. But guess what happened? The wife took care of the husband. Now all of a sudden, who takes care of her? The kids? Maybe she doesn't even have kids, or maybe the kids aren't capable, or whatever combination of issues there are.
Well, and you've got older couples that they don't have a lot of asset and they can't afford that. I mean, it's so compounding. It's just not that I'm trying to say, hey, everybody should go get long-term care. It would be great if everybody could, but I think it's interesting for our listeners to understand some options they should be looking at and the reality versus the emotion of that, which is very difficult.
I would say what you're pointing out is the following: is even if you're not necessarily going to be purchasing long-term care insurance because either it's cost prohibitive or your health isn't good enough so you don't qualify, you
Right.
need to at least have some kind of action plan in mind, because usually what happens is one spouse is no longer with us mentally to where they can even put something in action, and the other one's scrambling around to take care of physical care, but also financial care at the same time. It's a real compounding problem, like you're just saying. And people don't make good decisions when they're emotionally tied to a decision. So if you already have a blueprint in place, I'm not enjoying this, but I know this is one of those what ifs. And here we are. Was the plan all along to sell the house? Or do we have another bucket of money that we already have stowed away for the if and when this was going to happen?
So let me ask you one more question on this, and then I want to move on to when people sell their house and they have all of this equity left over, but they don't necessarily want to buy another house. So my last question on long-term care, you said that if someone's not already in good health, the likelihood of them being able to qualify to get the insurance is highly unlikely, or it's going to be really expensive. But if one spouse can get it and the other spouse cannot, do you still advise that at least that one spouse gets it?
Yeah, it's one of those deals where sometimes you just have to figure out how to hedge your bets. Again, most likely in most cases, it's usually the wife that's going to be the need care, because her husband passes and now she's left on her own. So if she's in
Okay.
good health and can easily qualify, and not to be harsh, but let's just say the husband didn't qualify because long history of cancer, major heart issues, had several strokes, most likely she's going to outlive him and she will become the risk. But here's an interesting statistic. This is ballpark, so I don't want to misquote myself or that. But if you have a married couple that has been married greater than 30 years, when one of them or both of them reaches age 65, there's a almost greater than 50% chance that one of them will live at least to age 92. Now, I don't know
They
about you,
will leave at least, wait, your audio went out. They will live at least to what?
live until at least age 92.
Wow. Okay.
Regardless of health history, this is just very broad brush statistics. Married couples that are together that long, one of them most likely will live till age 92. And
You
longevity,
know that both of my in-laws are both over in their 90s.
yeah,
So they're yeah, it's crazy, and they're just starting to have really bad health issues. So they did pretty good, I think. So that's probably the exception of that.
yep. My
So
grandparents on my mom's side lived until 96 and 97, respectively. But my mom passed at age 55 of a subarachnoid cerebral aneurysm. So I
wow.
definitely got the school of hard knocks when it comes to estate planning as well as long term care planning. Because who ended up taking care of grandma and grandpa? This kid, because my mom passed.
It's interesting is if you look around and you talk to families that have had these traumatic experiences at younger ages, it's almost as if that's you should look at that and you should remember that because that should drive your decision making on what you would do differently.
Yep, school of hard knocks.
Sounds like
Any
you do.
lessons, better learn them.
Let's move on to I've got this house. I've sold the house. Let's just say it's a married couple. They sold the house. They're California. They get their $500,000 exemption. But now let's just say they've got $400,000 after taxes. They don't want to buy another house. What would you advise them if they don't have a financial planner, other than getting a financial planner? What would you sit down? And what would be the initial conversation with that client? Because what I'm trying to do is set it up. So I really want people to feel encouraged to take more responsibility about their finances and not be afraid of it. So if they came to you for the first time, what are some of the simple questions that you would ask so they felt comfortable?
We get very goal centric, at least for my firm.
Okay.
What is it that you want the rest of your retirement to look like? Do you have enough cash flows to enjoy the life that you really want? Have you actually laid out an actual long-term care plan or any kind of legacy plan you want for your kids or grandkids? And then we just go, okay, you now have this nest egg. You maybe have some income gaps in between what you want versus what you currently have. But is there any way maybe we can earmark some of these assets either towards a long-term care event or future retirement needs? Because I don't know about you, but things don't get cheaper as you get older. And I usually try to explain to people as a simple concept known as the rule of 72. It's a very common financial term, but let me simplify it. Usually people use it for an idea of how quickly their money will double in value. Because you take the number 72, you divide it by an assumed rate of return, and that tells you how quickly your money can double. So let's just say you're expecting an 8% rate of return. That literally means that your money doubles in 9 years using simple math, right?
Okay.
But inflation can also be viewed the same way as how quickly your money is cut in half. So if you think inflation is a meager 3%, that means in 24 years, your $500,000 is the same as only having 250,000 when you look at time value.
That's scary. That's scary when you look at it that way.
I think a lot of people, and this is coming from a little bit of a psychology background, because I have an MBA, but I jokingly tell people I'm pretty certain I'm the only UF MBA grad who had a background in psychology and film production. Another story for another day.
I was going to say, I'm mixing those together. I'm like to deal with the emotion and then know how to control the show, something like that.
But most of financial planning has little to do with dollars and cents and actual raw emotions that are tied to person's goals. And one of the dilemmas most people have, this is regardless of intelligence level, IQ level, EQ level, or anything else, recency bias. Whatever has happened within the last 6 to 12 months is the presumption of what will carry forward forevermore. I can tell
Interesting.
you. So for a few years back when inflation was almost 9%, people were scared to death that they wouldn't even be able to afford a carton of milk within a few years. Because if you just assume 9% is the ongoing inflation rate forevermore, you need to put all your money in stocks to even keep pace with inflation. That's not really how it works. There's ebbs and flows to everything in life, like home values. Speaking from Florida, and I'm sure parts of California are like this too, from the time COVID hit to the year 2025, most homes in Florida doubled in value.
Oh, yeah. And everyone's going to Florida too. So that's keeping your values up. Well,
The
not
great
everyone.
we jokingly call it. But you can't assume that, "Oh, I have a $500,000 home. I'll sell it in a few years for $1,000,000. You don't think at some point homes will stop appreciating at 14%? You have to hope they don't keep appreciating that rate because then you won't be able to afford your homeowners. It's ludicrous, but people really do get caught up in the here and the now as though that will be the forevermore. And that's a pitfall you can't fall for. People do it with the markets too. When the markets are doing really well, they assume forevermore I'm going to keep making 14, 15, 16% on my portfolio.
So what are things or advice that planners give? Because I know in my industry, there are things that I hear other agents say, and they're the cringe comments, or they're just the worst advice. If you were to name the top three things that you think is the worst advice given someone, I'll set the scene for you. So you have this couple that just sold their house. They have this bucket of cash they want to invest. And now the three things that just make you cringe that planners that don't have your experience and your integrity will say. that are very misguided that this kind of client would have to look out for?
This is fascinating, but one, you can almost tell what type of advisor they're talking to based upon the advice you hear secondhand from the client. If you just invest in a good growth allocation portfolio, you'll make 10 to 12%. So you should be able to take out 10 to 12% without touching your principal. That's cringer because
Okay.
I will ask you, if you ever find me a portfolio that gets you exactly 10 to 12% every single year without fail, it's a unicorn.
I want a unicorn. I want 2 unicorns, actually.
Yeah, I know. Now you may average 10 to 12% possibly in an all stock portfolio, possibly, but the sequence of those returns is never exactly the average. So if you look at the S&P 500 over 100 years, yeah, it might be averaging a little over 10%. But how many years is it up 25% or down more than 25%? Or even up or down more or less than that 10 to 12% range all the time. So if you take out,
Well, less than a year ago, everybody was talking about how they are looking at their pension plans and they're looking at all their investments that they can't touch, just dive. And then all of a sudden they're back up and they're making their money again. It's just you cannot have this constant growth, some growth. So that's your first cringe. What's your second cringe?
I always know that they talk to an insurance agent, not necessarily a financial planner, when let's just say it's a $500,000 nest egg they have from their house, right? And they come
Right.
to me and say, well, you take a look at this illustration. I really like the idea of it. And when I hear illustration, I go, okay, sure, I'll take a look. 100% of all their assets to go into an annuity. Now, annuities are not evil, just like mutual funds and ETFs are not evil. They're arrows in the quiver, as I call them. But to take
Right.
someone's entire nest egg and just shove it into an annuity, probably not the most prudent thing to be doing. So that's the number 2 cringer. And number 3, someone that really didn't ask the client what matters most to them. Like, really and truly, do you not care about leaving any money behind? Great. We've got solutions for that. Do you want to optimize growth with some downside protection? Sure, we can handle that. Do we want to insure or find some means to self insure against a long term care event or premature death? Then let's do that. If those are things that matter to you, let me come up with a solution that is catered to you, not what anybody else and everybody else should be doing via TikTok videos or
Similar to mine is when I meet with someone that's never sold their house before, they have no idea where to start, even what to ask. And I feel that's very true with your industry. So when people come to meet with you or they come to meet with someone that really isn't the right fit, I don't think they really know that they're the wrong fit because they don't know the questions to ask. So my question to you would be, what are 5 basic questions they should have in mind when they go meet with this person to see if they even are clicking and are compatible to even start working together?
you almost have to hit the 800-pound gorilla in the room first, at least in my industry. Can't speak for yours. Number 1, are you a fiduciary or will you act as a fiduciary on my best interests? Number 2, how do you get compensated? Number 3, who are your ideal clients? Number 4, what areas do you specialize in? And number 5, what services can you provide me beyond just retirement planning or whatever the initial conversation's about? Because the more holistic a planner can be with somebody, they can be mindful of all the pitfalls and everything else that maybe the client isn't even thinking about for themselves, or they're sticking their head in the sand about. Because to be quite frank, we were talking about long-term care quite a bit earlier. It can be a very triggering conversation for a lot of people. Because what's a long-term care event? You're physically incapacitated or you're mentally in decline. It's very sad to witness it. It just is. Well, if it's a loved one at any capacity, even if it's just a good friend that you've known from church, seeing them in that level of decline, it's very disheartening. So it is also hard for people to be very open and candid about what bothers them or what worries them. When I talk about goals and objectives, it's not just what lovely things would you like to see happen. It's also what things would you like to not see happen if you can avoid it. Now, I don't have a fountain of youth to avoid physical or decline, but what kind of care would you really want to have enforced for you or your loved one if and when that may happen? And some people, they don't care, but I think a lot of people pretend not to care. And that's also very dangerous. And one spouse, if they're married, one spouse may have a completely different ideology than the other. And we're going to have to find a way to compromise. We just will. It's not just about you. It's about your loved one too.
And do you feel that if someone was starting out that they should, if they, how do they find the planner? Would you go and meet with a couple of different planners first to find out, to really get a sense of how different they are? Would you go by referral if you had someone that had never met with a planner? Or a client yesterday said to me, they used to have Wells Fargo manage all of their business plans, but once, I guess, something internally happened with Wells Fargo, so they didn't have high-powered executive type people handling the finances. So they pulled all of their investments and now they're meeting with an investment planner. To make a move like that, I think you have to be a little bit savvy already, but let's just say you don't have that kind of education and you're just going to go get your feet wet. How would they start?
Referrals can be helpful. Full disclosure, about 90% of all my new clients are via referrals. And as far as
Okay.
my team as a whole goes, we have 11 advisors and 4 assistants. It's about 3/4 when we're all via referrals. Usually it's very similar, like-minded people with similar circumstances or family or loved ones.
Because we got to wrap it up because we just have to wrap it up. It's been great. But what are some things I haven't asked you that you feel people should know?
You really need to have someone, if you're looking into advice, solid advice, sit with someone that can talk holistically with you. And if they are not the right fit, perhaps they have someone that's a specialist in something you actually need or want. And to your question earlier, to answer it a little more specifically, it's okay to go and look for a second or third opinion to see if you find a financial planner or advisor that's a better fit for you. Because I'll admit, quite
Okay.
frankly, I am not necessarily the right fit for all the people I meet. They might find
Oh,
me,
I think that's true about everything, though. But that's very honest. I like that.
some people find me very crass. I'm a former New Yorker, still recovering from all that. So people might find me a little bit hard because I usually go bad cop, as I jokingly call it. Usually when I work in tandem with one of my fellow advisors, we have what I call the good cop, bad cop. One advisor might be the good cop. I'm almost always explicitly the bad cop because I'm a little bit more blunt. And
Okay.
one spouse isn't really listening or compromising with their fellow spouse, I just call them out on it. Some people may not be ready for that. And you know what? I'm not going to get along with them. But I may have someone
Okay. That's fair.
I may have someone on my
That's
team that
fair.
is better fit for their personality and can meet them more eye to eye. Hey, that's okay. You
So
want
if someone wanted to, thought that you guys would be a match, let's end this by how does someone get in touch with you and share some social media? Just share all your name and contact information. That would be great.
Yeah, so if you go on LinkedIn or Facebook, you can look up Clearview Wealth Management of Florida, or you can check out our website, clearviewwealthmgnt.com, or you can always call our offices at 321-254-5030.
I want to thank you for being on my podcast. I think people got some really great points and you got right to the point, and I appreciate that. Nice talking to you. I'm going to let you go and let you go sell lots of plans.
I love it.
I'm Robbyn Battles, and I'm just saying, I want to thank you for listening. I hope you'll come back for future episodes and be sure to like, share, and follow. I'm just saying, let's get to the point. I'm Robbyn Battles.